Hey, what's up? What's up, everybody? All right. Thank you. I made Lino clap for me, so thank you, Lino, for doing that. I appreciate that. Hey, you guys, it's so good to be back with you. I was out last week, but let me give a quick shout out to Aaron, who spoke last week. Can we make some noise for Aaron at all of our campuses? He did a great job. I'm so grateful for him that he's on our team, but I'm excited to be here as we continue in our series called Views. And in this series, we are spending some time talking about how our connection with God can influence how we see and view the world around us. And this week, we're going to continue that series by talking about how spending time with God can influence the way we view the world around us. Now, there's many ways to spend time with God, but the one I want to focus on tonight is prayer. I have it right here, prayer. I want us to think and talk about prayer because prayer is more than just a conversation with God. It's actually a lifestyle that you and I live that's a part of every single thing we do every single day. But have you ever prayed, or have you ever prayed maybe in front of a group, been asked to pray, and like all of a sudden in the middle of it, you're like, what am I doing? And you start saying a bunch of likes and a bunch of ums, and you're not sure how to get out of it all of a sudden. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was taught that in order to pray, I had to fold my hands, close my eyes, and talk to Jesus like I was writing him a formal letter, right? Like, dear Jesus, thank you for this day, blah, blah, blah. And I always thought that was so weird because I literally never talked to any other person on the planet like that. Like if one day I were to go up to my wife and be like, dear Kelsey, thank you for being my wife, thank you for loving me. She would be like, get away from me, you weirdo, right? And so when we view prayer like that, like this formal thing that we're kind of forced to do, it can become irrelevant to our lives. But what if that's not how prayer is supposed to work? Well, tonight what I want to do is I want to show you how prayer is supposed to work and how it can most positively influence the life that you are currently living. And the way I want to do that is I want to give you 4 steps to teach you how to pray. Now, I don't want you to think of these steps as like steps on a ladder because prayer isn't always about arriving at answers or solutions. That happens some of the time, but that's not the point. Instead, I want you to think of these steps as like dance steps that give you a form and a rhythm to your time with God. And here's how I want you to remember it. Try to make it really easy. I want you to think of the acronym PRAY, okay? P stands for pause. So a couple years ago, I was at a coffee shop downtown when a ruckus erupted. All of a sudden, I'm trying to enjoy my coffee. This noise comes from somewhere. I hear people shouting and a dog barking and this like loud metallic crash that sounded like metal being scraped over concrete. So me and everyone around me is like looking around to see what was going on, and suddenly we see what's happening. There's a dog that's been leashed to one of those metal folding chairs, and it was running in circles. And what had happened was that chair must have like got knocked over or something and scared the dog, and so the dog was running away from the chair, but it was connected to the chair, so it was freaking out, running in circles and barking its head off. The whole time, the owner was running behind the dog saying, stop, slow down, but the noise of the chair was so loud that the dog just kept on running faster and faster and faster. And my first thought upon seeing this was, this is why I don't own a dog. This is a huge inconvenience. I'm trying to enjoy my coffee, it's just like chill, right? But then my second thought is, man, isn't this how so many of us live our lives? So many of us are running in the noise. We're running from class to class, from job to sport, from party to party, from image to image on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. Yes, I know what TikTok is. That always gets a laugh. I'm in it. I'm cool, whatever. But our whole life is spent running in the midst of the noise. And when our whole life is spent running in the midst of the noise, it becomes really difficult to hear what God is wanting to say. And so the first step in learning how to pray is actually learning how to pause for a minute, to cut out distractions and focus on God. The writer of Psalm 46 sums it up perfectly when he says, be still and know that I am God. See, prayer starts when we pause, because once we slow down, we can begin to listen to what God has been trying to say to us in the first place. Because prayer is actually not our chance to just fill God in on what's going on in our lives. Instead, prayer is actually our chance to get to know God and what he is wanting to do in our lives. Now, let me be clear. When I'm talking about pausing, and praying. This does not mean that you have to suddenly become a monk who lives on a mountain, who never talks to people, has no social media, anything, and has no life. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is actually finding points in your day where you stop, points in your day where you pause, points in your day where you can just take a breath. So let me ask you, what would it look like for you to pause? For some of you, it might be actually turning off your phone, like hitting the actual off button on your phone for just a few minutes, just take a breath. For others of you, it might be committing to not checking your phone first thing in the morning until you find time to spend with God. For others of you, it might be on your way to school, whether that's in a car or in a bus, and you listen to music that focuses your attention on God. For some of you, it might mean that you have to take something out of your life that is causing more noise and forcing you to run. What would it look like for you to pause? Because once you pause, you can then begin to listen to God. So that's the first step in prayer, to pause. And the second step is to rejoice. So a few weeks ago, I went out of town. I was away from my family for a weekend. So when I got back, I was, of course, excited to see my family. But I was really excited to see my 3-year-old daughter, Olive, partly because she's my best friend in the whole world, but also because she's awesome and I had stuff for her. So I walk into my house, and the first thing I hear is Olive screaming at me. She comes to me, she's like, "Dad, can you give me a snack?" And I'm literally standing there like, "Hello?" And she's like, "Dad, can you give me a snack now?" And I'm just like, "Hey, I'm home." And it like clicked in her 3-year-old brain like, "Oh yeah, Dad has been gone the entire weekend, I should say hello." So she comes over to me, she gives me a hug, I pick her up, she gives me a kiss on the cheek, and then she like melts in my arms. She's like, "Dad, can I have a snack now?" And the thing is, like, I didn't mind that she was asking me for stuff. In fact, I like getting her things. I'm her dad. I love her. But sometimes I really just like for her to look me in the face and give me a hug first. And I think that's the kind of rejoicing that God is looking for in us. He just wants us to acknowledge that he is in the midst of our life. He is with us saying, "I'm here." And to recognize that that is good news. In Philippians chapter 4, the writer Paul kind of sums up this idea when he says this. He says, "Always be full of joy in the Lord." I say it again, rejoice. Now, the truth is that none of us can always be full of joy in our circumstances because sometimes life is really tough. For some of you right now, life is really tough. And for you to try to find joy in what's going on in your life right now would be almost impossible. But notice that that's not what Paul said. That's not what this verse says. In fact, what Paul's really trying to say is that you don't have to pretend to be perfect when you come before God. Instead, God is wanting us to find happiness, to be happy, to know that when life isn't perfect, that we are not alone, that he is with us. You see, so often we will ask God to airlift us out of our problems, right? Which is called a miracle, and sometimes he does that. But most of the time, God's response to our problems is to parachute into the middle of them, be alongside of us, and walk us through our problems. Again, the writer of Psalms sums this up so clearly in chapter 23, where he says, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me." Some of you are walking through the darkest valley of your life right now, and the only thing you need to hear tonight is that God is standing in the midst of your mess saying, "I am here. You are not alone." And so, friends, when you pray, rejoice. And a great way to do that is to just say thank you to God. It's to just thank him that he is with you through that math test that you were really worried about, that game that you were going to play in. He was with you in that performance that you had. He's with you when you felt all alone and needed someone to be by your side. Rejoicing sets our minds off of our circumstances and onto a God who never leaves us. So that's the second step in prayer, rejoice. The third step is ask. Pause, rejoice, ask. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus is telling a story about how much better God is at giving gifts than we are. And I actually love this kind of story that he tells, this parable that he shares with people, because this is what he says in Matthew chapter 7. He's talking to parents, right? You parents, if your children ask you for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask you for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not, hopefully, parents. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask him? I love this story because it seems so ridiculous to me. Like, what dad is going around giving their kid a snake when the kid's like, Dad, like I just wanted a fish. Do you even know what a fish is, Dad? It's like when you go to your parents and you're like, Mom, Dad, here's what I want. I want Apple AirPods. That's all I want, just Apple AirPods. And they give you like the knockoff version of those. Like, they look this similar, but they're like crappier, you know what I mean? The thing is, Jesus' point is, when God gives gifts, they're never knockoffs. When he responds to our requests, they're never fake. It's real every time. And the thing that Jesus wants us to catch here is that God is not only able to respond to our requests, he's able to miraculously respond to our requests. And that word miracle basically means anytime God directly involves himself in your life, that is a miracle. Typically, when we think of miracles or the miraculous, we think really big, right? Think of a dead person coming back to life, or a blind person seeing, or someone being completely healed from cancer. And the truth is that those are miracles, and we should ask for them because God is able to miraculously respond to those requests. But here's the thing about miracles. If we spend all our time asking and looking for really big ones, we might often miss the small miracles that God is doing in our lives every single day. One of the keys to prayer is realizing that miracles do happen, and they happen every single day, big ones and small ones. I mean, think about it for a minute. It is a miracle that you woke up this morning, that your brain and your blood and your body all work together to put breath in your lungs. That is a miracle that we so often overlook. It is a miracle when relationships are restored, when friendships are restored. It is a miracle when people find hope. It is a miracle on that day when you were having a really tough time, when a friend reached out to you or a small group leader texted you. It is a miracle when that friend that you have been inviting to church for weeks finally says yes. All of those are miracles. And we will begin to see more miracles in our lives when we keep asking for them and we keep looking for them, the big ones and the small ones. In fact, the verses just before Jesus explains how good God is at giving gifts, this is what he says. He says, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. And he goes on to say, for everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and everyone who knocks, the door will be opened to you. So friends, when you pray, ask God for the big things, the things that are completely out of your control, and you need God to get involved. But don't overlook the small things. Don't overlook asking God to help you find your wallet when you lose it. Don't overlook asking God to help give you the courage to talk to a friend that you want to mend a relationship with. Don't overlook those moments when God provides for you over and over and over again by filling your lungs with air, because that is a miracle. When we begin to notice these small, everyday kinds of miracles, we'll begin to realize that God really does have the ability to miraculously respond to our requests. So that's the third way that we can learn how to pray. And the final way is this. The final way is that we can learn how to say yes to God. Pause, rejoice, ask, yes. And saying yes to God happens when we put God first in our lives and we allow him to call the shots. It's us going to God and telling him, God, I'm giving you my mind, I'm giving you my perspective, I'm giving you my ideas, I'm giving you my identity, I'm giving you my opinions. I want to try to give everything over to you because I trust you, because I want to trust you more. But listen, let me tell you what this does not mean. This does not mean that we then live our lives constantly waiting for God to tell us by some voice or some sign or something what college to go to, or what career we should take, or who we should date, or what sport we should play. Instead, what it means, and catch this, it means that we constantly and consistently invite God into the life we're already living, and we ask ourselves, would God say yes to this? Would God say yes to the college I'm going to? Would God say yes to the relationship that I'm in? Would God say yes to the music that I'm listening to? Would God say yes to the apps that are on my phone? Saying yes to God means we filter all of our actions, decisions, thoughts, and intentions through the filter of faithfulness to God. In Psalm 37, it sums it up by saying this: trust in the Lord and do good. Or another way of saying that is say yes to God and then do good. Do good stuff in the world. Live in the land and feed on faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. See, the most important thing about praying is not that we say a prayer, but that we become a prayer. What I mean by that is that through praying, we become the kind of person who looks for spaces to pause and focus our attention on God. We become the kind of person who can rejoice in any circumstance because we know that we don't have to face it alone. We become the kind of person who can ask God for the big things in our life and trust him with the small things in our life. We become the kind of person who constantly is asking, would God say yes to this? And if the answer is yes, then I'm all in. Saying yes to God is living our life as a prayer. And I think this whole idea of praying is summed up by Paul again in his letter, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. He says, always be joyful, never stop praying. One way that I like to read this is, do you always want to be joyful? Then never stop praying. Never stop being the person who has enough time for God. Never stop being the person who can constantly rejoice because you know who God is and that he's always with you. Never stop being the person who is willing to ask God for big things in your life and trust him with small things. Never stop being the person who is willing to say yes to God in every circumstance of life. So my question for you tonight, Rev, is are you willing to pray? Are you willing to have pause in your life? Are you willing to rejoice? Are you willing to ask and to say yes? Because if you are, then you can step into a practice that has the power to help you perceive and view the world more clearly. Because when you have that kind of trust and relationship with God, it puts everything into focus. But the only way to really do that is to practice it. So here's what I want you to do. In just a few minutes, I'm going to dismiss you guys to small groups. And when you're there, I want you to do this as a group. I want you to pray together. I want you to take some time and pause. Just take a collective breath for a second. And then I want you to rejoice. Share things that God has done in your life. Talk about ways that he showed up for you. Spend some time asking God for things, for stuff that's going on in people's lives. Big things, small things, everything in between. And then as a group, ask yourself the question, where do I need to say yes to God? Maybe for you or in your group, saying yes to God means cutting something out of your life. Maybe saying yes to God is committing to do something, like joining us in reading Proverbs. We're still in it. If you're following me on Instagram, so many of you have reached out. I love it. Continue to follow me. We're reading Proverbs for the next 15, 16 days. Maybe you need to commit to joining that. Maybe saying yes to God is just showing up next week to church. Maybe saying yes to God is inviting your friend that you're really nervous to invite. What is that thing that you know you need to say yes to? Talk about that in your group. And in that moment, realize that you're praying. Realize that you are connecting with God and allowing him to influence your view. The more time we spend in prayer, the more influence God can have on how we view the world around us. So this week, as you pause, as you rejoice, as you ask, as you say yes, notice how it changes your view. All right, Rev, at all campuses, let's take a moment right now and let's pray. Jesus, Thank you, Lord. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for providing the people in these seats across all of our campuses. God, I count them as friends. I may not know all of them, Lord, but you do, and I know how you feel about them. I'm so grateful for them in this place and what you're doing in their life. God, I ask that we would be reminded of prayer this coming week, that we would find time to put it in our rhythm. And Lord, help us to say yes to you. Empower us to say yes to you in every area of our life, inviting you into the things that we're already doing and listening to your voice. So God, we trust you. We put our trust in you. We love you. We ask, God, that you would do amazing things as we learn to pray. In Christ's name, amen. All right, Rev, thanks so much. See you next week. Register for Rev Retreat.